A lot of people have strong opinions about vaccines. This video won't be getting into that debate. There are plenty of videos out there that argue on both sides of that issue, and frankly, I don't want to get into the middle of it. To be honest with you, when I planned out the list of things that I wanted to talk about in this channel, vaccines didn't make the cut. But then the Pfizer and Moderna Covid-19 vaccines were developed, and I had the opportunity to take the shot if I wanted it. As a teacher, there's a 100% chance that I'm going to come in contact with COVID-19, so I needed to have as many safeguards in place as possible. Like many, the knowledge that this vaccine was developed in less than a year made me a little bit nervous, so I started doing my homework. What I discovered is that the vaccines are a completely new type of technology. They don't work like any other type of vaccine that we've seen before, and how they work is actually quite fascinating. And that's what this video is all about. Today we're talking about mRNA technology. I'm Mr. Wilson. Welcome to class. In the interest of transparency, let me start by saying that this is the second version of this video. Google, the parent company of YouTube, is aggressively combating false information about the topic of vaccines, and I completely support that endeavor. Because of the proliferation of false information on the internet, my job as a teacher is actually becoming significantly harder. As an educator, I always ensure that every topic I teach is accurate, and I never teach outside the scope of my expertise. Nevertheless, Google removed my first video on this topic. When attempting to determine why, I learned that most of the videos are screened by an automated system, and it's easy to see why. In May of 2019, over 500 hours of video was uploaded to YouTube every single minute. There's no way a human could possibly review that much content, so why did my video get flagged? I'm not sure why, because they don't tell you, but as a computer programmer myself, I know a little bit about how computers think. So I'm taking another stab at this. My theory is that this topic has been so flooded with misinformation that the algorithm is actually much more sensitive here than with other issues. I'm therefore going to ensure that no opinions are present in this video, only data and facts. And I'm going to cite the source of all the information that I present in the video and in the description below. Hopefully this objective approach will help this second video make the cut. I'm going to start by citing my qualifications. I hold a California teaching credential in biology and am therefore qualified to teach on this topic. While I do believe I thoroughly understand the more complex biochemistry aspects of this topic, those things are technically exceed my qualifications and will therefore be considered beyond the scope of this discussion. The content in this video will be presented at a level comparable to what you would find in a high school level biology class in order to remain within the scope of my educational certification. We're going to start by exploring how existing vaccine technology works and how your immune system works. All of the information regarding these topics came from a good old-fashioned college textbook. There's so much false information on the internet, I figured a textbook is probably the best source of information. For the stuff that I couldn't find in the textbook, especially the information regarding the new mRNA technology, that came from documentation provided directly from Moderna and Pfizer, the CDC, and other scientifically accredited organizations. Citations for everything will be included in the video and in the description so that you know everything I'm saying is accurate. To understand this new technology, we should probably start with a description of how your immune system works and how existing vaccine technology works. So let's start with your immune system. Most airborne viruses enter your body through inhalation and start by infecting cells in your nose, throat, and lungs. Now, it turns out that that's actually really hard to do. Your cells don't like foreign invaders, and the cell membrane is actually pretty good at keeping unwanted things outside of the cell. Nevertheless, certain things do need to be able to cross over the cell membrane to get into your cells, and thus your cell contains special gates called receptors. Let's pretend this house is a cell and this door is a protein receptor. Now, I'm a virus and I'm trying to get my harmful genetic code into the cell. Why? Well, as it turns out, viruses like me are not actually alive. In order to reproduce, we must hijack the biological machinery of the cell and convince it to make copies of the virus. Now, this code contains the instructions that the cell will actually need to make those copies. If I can get the code into the cell, then I win. But this cellular membrane is preventing me from getting inside. Now, this protein receptor gate may provide me with a means of entry, but it's locked. And this is where the nefarious nature of the virus really starts to show. Through trial and error, I have figured out how to mimic the key to this receptor's lock. Once the key unlocks the gate, then the virus is free to inject its unique code into the cell. The cell starts to make copies of the virus. The virions start filling up the cell like a balloon until the cell eventually lyses or explodes. It spills the virus into the system where the cycle there continues. The virus's genetic material is actually quite fragile, just like the yolk of this egg, so the entire structure is encased within a hard protein envelope. Depending on the virus, this envelope could withstand the environment outside the body for anywhere from mere moments to days or longer. This is why some viruses like the flu can live on a surface for a long time, allowing your unwashed hands to pick it up and cause infection. But viruses like HIV really can't survive outside the body for long, so you can only contract it through direct contact with contaminated body fluids. Once your body detects an infection, it starts sending out all sorts of cells to the rescue. Some cells, like phagocytes, ingest the virus directly. Others kill cells that have already been infected to prevent them from completing their reproductive mission. These reactions will slow the infection, but ultimately something else needs to happen to finally end the war. Enter the antibody. Now, antibodies like this Play-Doh bind to the protein key the virus is using to bypass our cellular gatekeepers. This prevents the key from fitting the lock and effectively disables the virus's ability to infect new cells. But it takes several days for your body to learn how to produce these antibodies, and in the interim period, you get sicker and sicker. In the case of COVID-19, the disease caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, you might get very sick indeed. We've known for some time that the loss of smell and excessive exhaustion are common symptoms of COVID-19. What we have only recently discovered, however, is the reason why. There's growing evidence that the virus is actually limiting blood flow to certain areas of your brain. Whatever area is deprived of oxygen will therefore suffer from decreased functionality. If it's your parietal lobe, then you'll lose your sense of smell. If it's your pituitary, then you'll experience chronic fatigue. And if it's your cerebrum, then you may experience confusion, forgetfulness, and a loss of concentration. For most, these symptoms will ease once the virus is brought under control and normal blood flow is returned. For others, the damage may last for months or even be permanent. This same restriction of blood flow isn't limited to just your brain. Often permanent damage to the lungs, kidneys, heart, and other organs have been reported in as many as 40% of COVID-19 patients. As of this recording, 2.5 million people worldwide have died from COVID-19, 500,000 in the US alone. That's more than died in World War I, World War II, and Vietnam combined. When you combine the deaths with the long-term disabilities we've discussed and factor in the damage lockdowns have caused to the world economy and the impact school closures are having on education, it's clear that we need to find a solution, and that's where vaccines come into play. There are those who say that exposing yourself to the virus strengthens your immune system, and to some extent that is true. Exposure to the virus will allow your body to create the necessary antibodies required to prevent future reinfection. However, there is an abundance of evidence to indicate that contracting COVID-19 will give you immunity that could last as little as only 3 to 6 months, and emerging variants are dropping that number even lower. Clearly, exposing yourself to a potentially lethal infection with such a high incidence of permanent and chronic damage is not a good path to immunity. But what if we could generate the necessary antibodies without contracting the disease and suffering from its effects? Traditional vaccines aim to do just that. Different vaccines work in different ways. Sometimes a weakened version of the virus is used. The idea is that the virus will still do its usual thing, but it won't cause severe illness. Your body is able to fight off the illness much faster, and you're back on your feet in no time, with a healthy dose of antibodies for your efforts. With COVID-19, however, even a mild dose may prove too dangerous for the elderly and those with underlying conditions, so this is a dangerous route to take. So other types of vaccines actually break up the virus and inject all the pieces into your body. Since this virus has been decimated, it can't really cause infection anymore, but enough of the parts remain for your body to recognize the virus in the future. Now, this is how some COVID-19 vaccines in production across the world work, but it's not how the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines work. So what makes the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines different? Instead of using any portion of the virus to prime your immune system, it's only using a small portion of the virus's genetic code. This is the piece that tells your body how to create the virus's spike protein, which, as we know, is the key the virus uses to unlock the cells. Once this piece of code is inside your cell, the cell uses it to make the spike protein. The important thing to note here is that it isn't creating the whole virus, just this one little piece. Once complete, the protein is expressed on the cellular membrane where other immune cells can read it and start the process of creating an antibody to block it. But how does the code get into your cell in the first place? Now, this is what I actually find so interesting about this whole thing. The actual SARS-CoV-2 virus uses its spike protein to unlock your cellular membrane and inject its genetic payload. But the vaccines don't have any virus components, so direct injection isn't possible. The AstraZeneca vaccine being produced in Britain uses a harmless virus to inject the mRNA code into your cells. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines use something a little bit more benign. The mRNA code is enveloped in something called a lipid nanoprotein, but what is that exactly? Think of it as a drop of fatty fluid, and inside the droplet is the genetic payload. This droplet is not very sturdy, which explains why these viruses have to be kept in a super deep frozen state to prevent their decay. Now, what's really cool, pun intended, is that these temperatures make preservatives totally unnecessary. Now, since many of the anti-vax concerns stem from preservatives used in other vaccines, this should come as a little bit of a relief to many. This fat droplet or lipid nanoparticle is made of the same type of material as your cellular membranes. Have you ever seen two raindrops on your windshield combined together when they touch? That's essentially what's happening here. The fat droplet combines with the cellular membrane on contact, and the genetic payload is now one with the cell. So why do you need 2 doses of the vaccine? The first dose, as with a regular COVID-19 infection, would result in the creation of antibodies. But it's important to note that this is a novel virus. That means it's new and your immune system has never seen it before. Therefore, it doesn't have any protections in place to help you out. So if you're relying on vitamin C and other home remedies, they're not going to be able to prevent you from contracting the virus, although they are good for you. The first dose trains your body for what to look out for, but since this is the first time your body has seen this invader, your body labels it as rare and it doesn't keep the antibodies around for very long. The second dose tells your body, this thing's in the wild, this is the second time I've seen it this month, and I better keep my guard up. This encourages your body to create a type of immune cell called a memory cell. These memory cells stay in your body for a long time, and they help to remind your body how to quickly create antibodies in the future should you become infected later on. So, should you get the vaccine? I can't answer that for you. I will tell you that a safe and effective vaccine will be the key to ending the pandemic. And I will tell you that if too many of Earth's population don't get vaccinated, then the reservoir of humans who continue to circulate the virus will eventually mutate it into a version that the vaccines won't protect us against. What's nice about this mRNA technology, however, is that updates to the code can be made exceedingly rapidly, so boosters to protect against variants will be easier to produce. But one cannot deny that this is a brand new technology, and new things can always be a little scary. I can tell you that this vaccine did not skip any steps in the development process. Usually it takes vaccines years, if not decades, to be approved. This one was developed in less than a year. So how did that happen? All of the same trials and that new medications have to go through were conducted here, and most of the usual slowdowns are in fact caused by governmental interference. Anyone who has ever been to the DMV should know that the government has a special talent for doing things in a very costly and inefficient manner. But in this instance, the government got out of the way. They funded the research and they let scientists do their thing. If anything, this serves as evidence that we should be taking similar approaches to all things scientific. Maybe if we did, we'd have flying cars and transporters by now. As of the making of this video, 216 million vaccine doses have been administered. That's more people than who have actually contracted COVID-19. If you have a history of anaphylaxis, then you should seriously consider talking to your doctor before getting this vaccine. But if you don't have a history of allergic reactions, the available data so far indicates that this is safe. I advise you to talk to your doctor about whether the vaccine is right for you. Don't talk to your homeopath or a nurse or a friend who's married to a doctor. Don't do internet research. Talk to your actual doctor. Whatever you choose, I wish you good health.